It's now my pleasure to introduce to you our Convocation keynote speaker. Brian Treanor is Professor of Philosophy, Charles S. Casasa Chair of Social Values, and Director of the Academy of Catholic Thought and Imagination at Loyola Marymount University. A nationally recognized scholar, Professor Treanor is the author or editor of 6 books and many scholarly articles engaging a wide range of issues, including hospitality, environmental virtue, narrative identity, and human embodiment. As a teacher-scholar at LMU, he has been awarded the President's Fritz B. Burns Distinguished Teaching Award, was chosen twice as the ASLMU Professor of the Year, chosen as Greek Council Professor of the Year, and Honors Program Professor of the Year, among others. He is deeply committed to teaching undergraduates, teaching regularly in the core curriculum, and offering challenging and engaging electives in philosophy and environmental studies. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Brian Treanor.
Thanks very much. Henry David Thoreau began one of his most famous public addresses, which comes to us as the essay Life Without Principle, with a warning to his listeners. As the time is short, I will leave out all the flattery and retain all the criticism. Finding myself in a similar situation, let me warn you that today I will be forced to leave out much of the flattery, even if it's deserved, in order to retain not a criticism, but a challenge. There are many, many things I wish that we could discuss today. However, because the size of our gathering prohibits discussion, and because I've been asked to speak at the freshman academic convocation, I want to offer some brief and incomplete reflections on why you are here and what you should do while you're here. So let's start at the beginning. What is a university education, and particularly an LMU education, supposed to be about? At any university, even the worst university, you can get away from home and stretch your wings. Indeed, you don't even need to go to university for that. At almost any university, you could get a degree that would increase your earning potential. But if that's all you want, you could be at any other university. What's distinctive about the sort of education offered here at LMU? Here we run up against the first of a number of popular myths that the main point of a university education is to prepare you for a successful career. Now, while I do want you to get a job that will be reasonably well paid and secure, and more importantly, a job that you find intrinsically rewarding, and while I do want LMU to help you with those practical aims, today I want to suggest that the main point of a Jesuit liberal arts education is something else entirely. The primary goal of a liberal education is not to help you to get a better job, or to earn more money, or to accumulate vast amounts of factual knowledge, or to train you to do a specific task exceptionally well. Etymologically, the liberal in liberal education comes from the Latin libere, to free, as in to liberate. So a liberal education really has to do with freedom, and more precisely, a liberal education frees you. It frees you from yourself, or put another way, frees you to become yourself. It frees you from yourself in the sense that it helps you to overcome your own prejudice, narrow-mindedness, and parochialism. We've all got it. Opinions, beliefs, and even facts which, on reflection, you think, believe, or know without any firm foundation. For example, why, exactly, do you think what you think about political and economic systems, about justice, about God? Is it because you've tried to fairly assess the arguments and developed well-articulated reasons for your position? Or is it simply because an accident of birth and circumstance placed you in an environment that praised a particular political or economic system, a particular conception of justice, and a particular view of God? A liberal education frees you to become yourself because, in shedding your unreflective assumptions and prejudices, you're able to freely and consciously adopt new ideas and opinions, while simultaneously preserving the old opinions that successfully pass through the crucible of critical inquiry. So a liberal education helps you to become a full human being. someone who thinks for herself, someone who is conscious of the world around her, her place in it, and her relation to it, and someone who loves the good, the true, and the beautiful, even when she cannot yet be good, grasp truth, or appreciate beauty. So a liberal education is transformative, a word you'll hear a lot around here. It does not tell you what to believe, it merely helps you consciously and reflectively adopt those ideas and attitudes that you freely choose to adopt. And it doesn't make you anything in particular, rather it frees you to make yourself. Of course, while we will not force you to become something or someone, here at LMU we do harbor certain beliefs about what constitutes a worthwhile life and certain hopes about the men and women you'll become. You'll hear phrases on campus like finding God in all things, men and women for others, ethical leaders, and so forth, each of which expresses some aspect of the persons we hope you will become. But in any case, no university can give you a liberal education, because such an education requires your active participation and engagement. LMU can offer you a liberal education, but it is ultimately your responsibility to take up the task of liberating your mind. And it will require sincere and sustained effort on your part. How do you do this? Well, first, you have to prioritize your intellectual life while you're here. Your intellectual development is not something that happens only in the classroom, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m. It's something that should occupy the majority of your time and effort over the next 4 years. Focus on your classes. Engage your professors and your classmates outside of class. Talk to your peers about ideas rather than gossip or celebrities. This probably seems obvious. Nevertheless, look around you. Very, very few students will really hold to doing this. Primarily because most undergraduate students, I'm talking about across the nation here, treat university simply as an extension of high school and a precursor to economically advantageous labor. But I'm trying to suggest to you today it's more than that. To help you focus on your intellectual life, let me burst another myth about college. The idea that you should get as involved as much as possible while at LMU. That's crazy. In high school, you were told to get involved so you could build your resume. But here you should be concerned with building a self, yourself. Yes, you should explore and expand your intellectual horizons. Yes, you should try new things, but your commitments must be focused. Many people, including people at LMU, complain about being overcommitted, when the real problem is that they are, as a colleague once told me, undercommitted to too many things. As Thoreau would have it, simplify. Get rid of the inessential so that the essential can speak to you. You can only pursue at most a handful of things if you want to do them really well. And given the time and the money you're spending to come here, the first and most important of those things should certainly be your intellectual development. Second, embrace the core curriculum, which will require you to take courses that you would not choose for yourself. This, if you let it, will broaden your intellectual horizons, whether you're a philosophy major taking a biology course or an engineer taking Brit Lit. Be on alert. Epiphanies can appear in small, seemingly insignificant ways, and one great idea in a class where you least expected it can, if given careful attention, be enough to change your life. But note that even in a good core curriculum, not everything's required. So stretch yourself. Take a foreign language, at least to a level of conversational fluency. If you can, study abroad, but make sure you actually study abroad. Don't engage in student tourism. So a summer is good, a semester is better, and a year is better still. Third point, challenge yourself. The term student is related to the Latin studium, meaning painstaking application. Do not shy away from difficult classes or instructors. The most interesting, thought-provoking, and life-altering classes will also be difficult, and the very best professors will demand a great deal from you. My own policy as a professor is inspired by Goethe, who wrote, "Treat people as if they are what they ought to be, and you help them to become what they're capable of being." But I'm sorry to say that if you want a good liberal education, you're going to have to fight for it, even here at LMU, every day for the next 4 years. You'll have to fight against a society that tells you a university education is purely about competitive advantage in the job market, and that any class that does not pay dividends measurable in dollars is a waste of time. You'll have to fight against some of your peers, since some of them will not be prioritizing their education and their intellectual life. And you'll have to fight against your own fears, fears about what you're supposed to do with your life, fears about social expectations, fears about what constitutes real success, and more. There's one other thing you should consider during the next 4 years: who you want to become. There are relatively few changes in life that afford you the ability to make a break with your past. Of course, we can never fully escape our history, nor should we always seek to do so. But there are moments of relatively radical rupture that afford a certain freedom, and moving out of your parents' home to attend university is one of them. Arriving here at LMU, nobody knows what sort of person you were in high school, and people don't have any expectations about who you are and what you have done. The upshot is that you don't have to step into whatever role you played in high school: the class clown, the jock, the partier, the loner. Here you can start the project of making yourself the person you want to become, without the accumulated weight of the person people expect you to be. That is a remarkable opportunity that arrives relatively few times in the course of your life. So who do you want to become? If you don't sort this out for yourself, you will become by default some version of what most people in our society are: unreflective, hedonistic consumers. You should think very, very carefully about whether that would really make your life worthwhile, even if you become very successful at it. Varied sorts of research suggests that people are quite bad at predicting what will actually make them happy in the long run, and as a consequence, many people spend a great deal of time and energy pursuing things that are ultimately not in their own best interests. Read some philosophy and literature to get a sense of what sorts of lives might be meaningful. Then read some history, economics, and psychology to complement those insights. You need to think about what you want so that you have some sense, however tentative, of what you're aiming at. Once you've got that goal in mind, you can work on achieving it. Fortunately, Aristotle tells us that most of the characteristics that we admire in great people are in fact habits, cultivated to the point that they become character traits. If you want to become more disciplined and studious in order to benefit from what LMU has to offer, just start acting the way that a disciplined and studious person acts until that becomes a habit, and then stick with the habit till that becomes a settled character trait. You should also think very carefully about the people with whom you choose to be friends, as they'll exert an extraordinary degree of influence on the person you will become. When you're a freshman, it's all too easy to focus on how fun it is to stumble from a weeknight party with a junior or senior in the organization you hope to join. However, you ought to be asking yourself an important question as you laugh at the drunken antics of an upperclassman stumbling around at 2 a.m. the night before an exam or other commitment. Not, isn't he fun to hang out with, but is that what I want to be in 4 years? Here, let's address another myth, that college is the best 4 years of your life. Pause with me just for a moment and reflect on how truly pathetic that idea is. If that myth is true, you're going to peak at 21 years old, and it's all downhill from there. That certainly has not been true in my life, and I hope it's not true in yours. So while these years can be extraordinarily satisfying and rewarding if you invest the thought and effort, let's hope they're not the best. The idea that college is the best time of your life leads students to overvalue the things that college students supposedly do more than postgraduates: drink, party, and experiment in the ways associated with that scene. Now, I'm not going to utterly dismiss the experimental aspects of undergraduate life. It's an important part of your development as an individual. Everyone socializes as part of the undergraduate experience, and I met my future wife as an undergraduate. But the reality is that most of that time partying will be utterly forgettable, wasted, lost. So you need to keep things in perspective. Right now, you probably feel like you've got all the time in the world. You're all young, able, healthy, ambitious. But before you know it, you will be graduating and moving on. Tempus fugit, time flies. This is not a license to pursue an undergraduate life of base hedonism. Among the many things philosophy does is that it helps us to come to terms with reality, including the fact that we're all finite, the fact that you, like me, are going to die. You've got one life to live, one wild, precious life, as poet Mary Oliver puts it. Think carefully about how you intend to spend it and about what will make it worthwhile. You could come to LMU and simply do your time while socializing and partying, but you're also spending a great deal of money and, more importantly, 4 years of your one wild, precious life. Do you want to jump through the hoops like a trained dog, get a couple of letters after your name, and then march off to whatever society happens to dish out to you? Don't you want more than that? And aren't you better than that? Here I want to address a final myth, that you are the best as a class or as an individual that LMU has ever seen. You've probably been told this repeatedly by our recruiters. The class of 2019 is the most selective, most accomplished, most whatever that LMU has ever admitted. However, while I'm sure you've all done impressive things, both inside and outside of school, that, frankly, is the past. It impressed us enough to gain admittance, but now that you're freshmen, we expect more of you. In Middlemarch, George Eliot notes that there's a certain sort of reputation which precedes performance, and that in many cases this constitutes the larger part of a man's fame. She's making a distinction between promise, which you all no doubt have, and performance, which remains to be seen. In the same novel, one of the more admirable characters, Mr. Fairbrother, receives a choice position as the vicar of the parish at Lowick. His mother, much like all of our mothers, says proudly, "The greatest comfort, son, is that you deserved it." How many of you have heard similar things from your parents and mentors about your admittance to LMU? You deserved it. Well, no doubt, I don't disagree. But Fairbrother, all too aware of his own virtues and vices and of the vagaries of the world, replies, "When a man gets a good birth, mother, half the deserving must come after." Fairbrother recognizes that whether or not he deserves his new position has just as much to do with how he performs in that new position as it does with how he performed before receiving it. The same holds true for you and, frankly, for me. In your case, it's up to you to demonstrate that LMU was right in offering you a position here rather than someone else. And it's not your past achievements that will do this. Half the deserving is still to come. At this point, what you've shown us is that you've got potential, but unrealized potential is the most common commodity in the world. I hope that you heard these brief words in the spirit in which I've offered them to you. Not as a criticism, but as a challenge. A challenge to squeeze every last bit of value out of your 4 years here, and a challenge to become the very best version of yourself that you can become. If this sounds like a big task, it is. It's a lifelong task. And reflecting on that task brings to mind some advice given by the Roman statesman Seneca to a friend who asked about such daunting projects in the context of a finite life. So Seneca wrote the following: "The majority of mortals, Paulinus, complain bitterly of the spitefulness of nature, because we are born for so brief a span of life, and because this space that has been granted to us rushes by so speedily and so swiftly that all save a very few find life at an end just as they're getting ready to live. It is not that we have a short span of life, but that we waste much of it. Life is long enough and has been granted in sufficiently generous measure to allow the accomplishment of the very greatest things, if the whole of it is well invested. But when it is squandered in luxury and carelessness, when it is devoted to no good end, forced at last by that ultimate necessity, we perceive that it has passed away before we were aware of its passing. So it is, the life we receive is not short. We make it so. Nor do we have any lack of it, but are wasteful of it. One man is possessed by a greed that is insatiable, another by toilsome devotion to tasks that are useless. One man is besotted with wine, another paralyzed by sloth. Many are kept busy in vain pursuit of other men's fortune or in complaining of their own. So surely does it happen that I cannot doubt the truth of that utterance which the greatest of poets made with all the seeming of an oracle. That part of life which we really live is small, and all the rest of our existence is not life, but merely time. Let me conclude then by inviting you to live, to really live the next 4 years in pursuit of intellectual excellence, rather than to merely pass the time carelessly, waiting for your life to begin, waiting for your life to begin. This is it. This is your life, here, now. And finally, let me be among the first to welcome you, not as applicants or admittees or even as students, but as budding scholars and intellectuals, whatever path you choose for your life. Welcome to a several thousand-year tradition with contributions from every culture in every corner of the globe called human inquiry. Welcome to a 2,000-year conversation that is part of the Christian tradition, to a 700-year conversation called humanism, and to a almost 500-year conversation called Jesuit education. And finally, welcome as the newest participants in over 100 years of conversation, investigation, and collaborative inquiry here at Loyola Marymount University. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor